Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice Podcast. My name is Elle, and I am back again today to read some Law of One material and share with you my perceptions on the material. So, today I would like to speak about some topics about spontaneity, being spontaneous, how to be a glitch in the matrix, intellect versus intuition, sort of the power of now. Everyone likes to be in the now, and what does that mean, and all of these types of things. And a lot of it has to do with being spontaneous, being somewhat unpredictable, maybe, is a way of putting it. So, yeah, and then I'll also give you some examples from movies that I'm aware of, like The Truman Show and The Matrix, and sort of how those sort of things relate to this. Okay, so that is the idea of today's podcast, and with that, I have found two sections of quotes from the Law of One, the raw material. These are going to be sections that specifically mention the word spontaneous. So when I'm reading them, if I can sort of get your attention on those words, because this is the main important part of the podcast that I want to go over. Okay, so we're going to start with session 41.19. And this is a subsection of an answer. So Ra states here, the key to balance may then be seen in the unstudied, spontaneous, and honest response of entities towards experiences, thus using experience to the utmost, then applying the balancing exercises and achieving the proper attitude for the most purified spectrum of energy center manifestation in violet ray. Sort of a way of saying being balanced. And then I would like to add on a section from session 42.9, another subsection of an answer, and I will explain, but I'll read it to you first. So, 42.9, Ra says, the repression of emotions depolarizes the entity insofar as it then chooses not to use the catalytic action of the space-time present in a spontaneous manner, thus dimming the energy centers. End of quote. Okay, so there you go. There's two little quick things on spontaneity. So let's first of all just sort of reread these sentences before I go into my notes about what I want to riff on here. So, okay, so the key to balance may be seen in the unstudied, spontaneous, and honest responses of entities towards experiences. So the way that I sort of think of this in my head is somewhat being the difference between intellect and intuition, or instead of intuition, you might use the word creativity. So basically, here, how would I explain this here? I like to view life as, physical and metaphysical. So if we're to sort of look at the bigger picture of things, this is a spiritual world, right? There's, somewhat forces of light, and there are forces of darkness. So I would suggest that the forces of darkness very much are interested in utilizing their intellect and, sort of maximizing the focus there in terms of having other people be intellectual and them being intellectual, because it's more predictable, right? It's like, oh, well, if you're doing the logical thing, you're going to do this, and therefore it's sort of easier to control you if you're trying to intellectualize things, versus if you're sort of using your intuition. Well, the intuition is going to be more in line with spirit, and more in line with spirit, like intuition to me very much is related to your third eye indigo chakra. If you're activated in that chakra, the idea there is that you sort of perceive the creation to be one. Like everybody is one. There's oneness. Everyone has infinite worth. Therefore, your worth isn't necessarily more worthy than someone else's worth, right? So if you're channeling things from the intuition, intuition is not linear, right? It's like intellect seems to be linear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Whereas intuition seems to be sort of spontaneous and random. It could be anything, right? But if I'm to make the connection there between the indigo chakra and the unity perception, the idea would be is that Well, most things that your intuition is going to tell you are going to be somewhat a hint towards love, or at least recognizing unity with that other entity, right? Or with creation, at least. So, not playing the illusion of separation games, but realizing the truth of the unity, of oneness, of the creation being somewhat alive, if you will, being a part of the creator. So, let's reiterate some things here. Being spontaneous. I guess, what the heck am I trying to say here? I think I will have a better chance at getting this across if I try to sort of explain maybe some things from the movie The Matrix. I hope you guys have seen that movie. A lot of people have. There's like 3 of them or whatever. I guess a 4th one. I haven't even seen the newest one actually, but the old ones, right? They're very symbolic, and there's a lot of information in there that's somewhat accurate as they try to sort of explain the nature of our universe, right? So in the Matrix, you have you have Neo, right? And Neo interacts with a couple different entities in the Matrix. As he reaches like the source, he sees the architect, and the architect seems to be the architect of our illusion, the architect of the physical world. Seems to be the thing that controls everything. And when he meets the architect in that big TV room, he's a very intellectual guy, right? And he's a guy too. There's another tip off, is that you're sort of dealing with the lower aspect. The bottom 3 chakras are somewhat masculine and intellectual, right? So you have this guy, this architect, and he describes Neo as an anomaly. Right? He's the anomaly, which I would suggest is very much him being spontaneous, him stepping out of the illusion, out of the matrix, out of the intellect, the standard things that everybody accepts, and into the world of unknowns, the world of infinity and magic and spontaneity, right? So, and mainly, obviously, the main part of the whole movie, if you're paying attention, is it's about love. Like the anomaly that he somewhat partakes in is the fact that he doesn't give up on what's her face there, his lady. I can't even think of it. Trinity, right? He doesn't give up on Trinity because he he's making a choice of love, and even in the architect offers him a choice, and he says, this door will lead you back to the source. This other door will lead you back to Trinity. And so he chooses the door of love, which to the architect made it seem like they kind of made it seem like, look, you obviously should want to go back to the source, wouldn't you? But no, he somewhat is the anomaly, right? And he chooses love over what seems to be like, yeah, of course, shouldn't I just go back to the source? That makes sense. But no, he chooses love. He chooses that instead. So there you go. There's that anomaly, right? And then you can try to think of, where did Neo get a lot of that information that he was able to sort of make that decision with? Well, he got it from the Oracle. So remember the lady, the Oracle, who sort of sees the future, she's the future teller, right? Well, to me, that's somewhat metaphorical of the feminine aspect of this, and the intuition, right? Intuition is very much sort of like telling the future, seeing the future, but you can tell that her advice to Neo is very much about love, about him making a choice towards love, versus just him being like the normal guy, right? So that's sort of the idea here, right? Like, you want to be the glitch in the matrix. So we are in this third density illusion, this third density creation, and you look at the news and your work and just the everyday. We have a lot of electronics in our life too, right? So it's like this sort of reality is everywhere. It's very structured. It's very linear, very 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, one after the other. Right? So how do you create magic in this world? How do you be a part of, the intuition? You being part of like the Oracle, or you're trying to do that. Well, let me bring up another movie for you, and maybe I hope you've seen this one too. But The Truman Show. Okay, this is an amazing movie. I really, really like this one. The more I watch it, the more I just see things that I didn't see before. So one of my favorite parts in the movie Well, should I explain the Truman Show to you quickly, just briefly? So basically, he's like, he lives within like a big dome, essentially, like a world within the Earth, and there's like all these people who are working for the show, the Truman Show, and they all know that Truman is the main character of the story, but Truman doesn't know that he's the main character of this story, and it's just basically a reality show about his life, and he's just living his life, and the director of the show, he lives in the moon. He's like inside this fake moon, which there's some stuff there for you if you're wanting to go down symbolic routes. But anyways, that guy in the moon very much is trying to somewhat push Truman towards desired ends, right? They're trying to like push him towards where they sort of want the show to go. But the more that Truman wakes up and becomes this anomaly, and he learns these things of love from this one friend that he keeps meeting throughout the show, who try to get him to be spontaneous. He is that. Well, the more that he becomes that, the more that he creates problems for the show, and the more that he's unpredictable and hard to control. So one of my favorite parts in the Truman Show, in that movie, is where he meets that lady. Sorry, I can't remember her name. So not his wife, but the lady that he meets inside the school when they're reading the books or whatever. And she says to him, she says, "Look, if we don't go now, this will never happen." Or does she say it exactly like that? Yes, she says, "If we don't go now, it won't happen." And he says, like, what? Like, he's trying to say, like, hey, should we make a date? Should we go somewhere? And she knows that if she agrees to a future something in the future, right, that the creators of the show will put a stop to their meeting, right? They're going to put a stop to the magic of the love of that moment. Whereas she's suggesting to him, look, Truman, I'm not going to tell you that this is all fake, but what I will suggest to you is that if you would like this to happen, this experience between you and I, we need to go now. We need to leave now. Are you willing to sort of sacrifice this moment for a spontaneous moment of love? And that's the idea, right? So what he does is he gets her advice, and he looks at her and he goes, yeah, you know what, like, let's do this, let's go now, like, not in the future, we're going right now. So then what happens? Well, that's the whole catalyst and somewhat the beginning of his awakening. He now has a spontaneous experience. They run away from the school, and they bugger off over to the beach, and they're having fun together, and somewhat experiencing love between each other, and they have that moment which seems to wake him up. Of course, the illusion and the creators of the show send someone in to take her away from him, but at that point, his taking part in the spontaneity of that moment very much led to his further awakening later. And so then I'll give you another example of him being spontaneous. So then after that, he's kind of like going crazy in a way and trying to like figure out that, wow, all of this is somewhat planned and against him. And so, he's like in the car with his wife, and they're gonna go somewhere, and everywhere he wants to leave the city. Basically, he's trying to get out of here. He's trying to escape the illusion, if you will, right? So he's like, okay, I'm gonna go down this road, and he starts going in circles and circles around the road, and then like the directors of the show keep creating traffic blocks for him so that he can't leave the city. So as he is being somewhat logical and what would it be, like, predictable, right? They're able to put a stop to him. And I say this like metaphorically, but I really mean it physically. Like, I do think that metaphysically there are forces out there that are somewhat doing this to you. Whether you can actually see it or not is somewhat irrelevant. But the more that you take part in the spontaneity, the more that those types of things have trouble controlling you. It's like you can see the potential of future. Just based on everything that is happening right now in this moment, people who can see the future can basically see probability vortexes. So they can see like the potential of, if you're doing this, this is what's going to happen. But you could imagine if you're just taking a random spontaneous piece of intuition from yourself and randomly acting upon that, there's no way for the matrix necessarily to to foresee that coming. I mean, they may, but it would have been a very small probability vortex, which means that like there wasn't a lot of chance that you were going to actually pick that choice up as the choice. But that choice still exists. And then the thing is that a lot of, the negative forces in our life essentially rely on the fact that, that you're predictable and that you're not going to do these spontaneous things, in the name of love and things of that manner. So, what's some more things that we need to discuss about this? Well, part of being spontaneous, I would suggest, is not having an attachment to the outcome of your actions and sort of having minimal expectations as to what happens. So, same thing, right? Intellect. This is like when we're trying to serve other people, we think, hey, if A plus B equals C or something like this. It's like we have this formula in our head, like if I do this, this will happen and this will equal good. So yes, you should go out and attempt to do good things. I'm not suggesting that you just go out and act randomly. The point is that sure, you should go out and try to do good things, but should you somewhat be attached to the outcome and the way that things are going to take place, right? I would suggest that you're somewhat robbing the magic from the moment by trying to force a specific outcome. If instead you are open to the magic and the spontaneous, creative, just magic of the moment of the creator, leaving a spot open for infinite possibility to manifest, right? Like what's a way of saying this? It's somewhat like to expect the worst but hope for the best, I suppose, or something like this, right? It's like you're aware that things may not work out exactly the way that you intend them to, but your intention hopefully is good in doing whatever you're doing, and therefore, the outcome from whatever your intention is, it may be different from what you intended, but that's okay because you're trying to control things. That's the negative path. The positive path is a path of acceptance. The negative path is a path of control. So you go out there, you be spontaneous, you try to serve and love, do things right, but try to detach yourself from the outcome of those expectations as to how that should manifest, because the creator works in very mysterious ways, and you may do something that may seemingly result in something that you didn't expect, but you never know. In the long run, that might be a positive benefit to everybody involved. And, maybe if it wasn't, well, that's okay. You can still use your intellect to somewhat study what happened and try to avoid whatever you did in the future. So that's sort of the idea here is, not necessarily putting intuition above intellect either. That's a point that I should make here. Intuition and intellect just need to be balanced. It's like you need to have this beautiful play between the intuition and the intellect. You can't just have the intellect running your whole life. You just become this robot. You become predictable. You become non-human, really. Like, what makes you human is the fact that, that you're not a robot, is that you can be spontaneous and you can make a decision to just do something completely off of the computer program that wasn't necessarily programmed there for you. And, I would like to let's sort of expand on that even, and this no expectations of outcome will, and being this glitch in the matrix, do something non-logical, right? The intellect says, somebody wrongs me, I should wrong them. Somebody's unloving to me, I need to be unloving to them, right? So predictable. Be a part of the love of creation. Be that unlovable thing, right? Have somebody do the unlogical thing. Have somebody talk crap at you and give them a hug, or, I love you, or don't take it personally. Love the unlovable. To me, it's like, it's right. Oh man, Satan, these dark forces, they tempt you. I have said this in a previous podcast before. It's like you're gonna be very tempted and feel very righteous in getting back at somebody, right? Getting revenge. Just an easy example. It's like you've been wronged. You've absolutely been wronged. You're not incorrect about that. You should seek revenge, right? That sounds appropriate. But, we know that's somewhat incorrect. It's like if we are one and, you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes to serve them the best, probably, most likely the things that you're going to do not necessarily entail you getting revenge. There may be somewhat of a lesson in you trying to do and to react to somebody. But I would suggest that most of your reactions, if they come in love, like that doesn't even necessarily mean that they has to be like a soft reaction. A loving reaction can still be not necessarily like kind, well, not kind, but like easy. Like a proper loving reaction can be a difficult truth, is I guess is what I'm saying. But either way, the point is that you're wanting to come at this from a seemingly non-logical point. It's like if you've been wronged, well, try to right the situation. You've been somebody I don't know, somebody steals from you, I don't know, give something away, just do the opposite. Do the opposite of what your brain tells you sometimes. It's like your brain is just so programmed to just be like, oh, I've been wronged. How dare you? And react, right? And that's okay too, because they mention here part of being spontaneous is just spontaneously being an observer of your reactions too. And that kind of goes over that second raw sentence that I read to you, and I'll just reread it right now. The repression of emotions depolarizes the entity insofar as it then chooses not to use the catalytic action of the space-time present in a spontaneous manner, thus dimming the energy centers. So, like, as you're trying to repress emotions and repress the way that you react to outside stimulus, the more that, and the more that you're not reacting in a spontaneous manner, the more that you're actually dimming your energy centers. You're somewhat, not having you're dimming the energy centers. You're minimizing the power that can come through those energy centers, right? Wouldn't we more so want to be activated and balanced would be sort of the goal. So in you studying your spontaneous reactions to outside catalyst, you are able to come to a better balance within yourself, because you're essentially seeing the things that trigger you, and then you can inspect as to why those things trigger you, and hopefully find out the source of why they would bring such a trigger to you, right? Versus if you were just using your intellect and trying to control everything, control outcomes, control your reactions to things, you're just putting like a damper on your light. And so that doesn't even mean that your spontaneous reactions are correct. It's just that within your spontaneous reactions, that's how you sort of find the path to the truth. When you react negatively, let's say, somebody outside of you may have the opportunity to now correct you, versus if you would have just kept that to yourself, not said anything, you would just basically sit with that catalyst, and it may not go anywhere. It may just sort of just get spoiled, right? So sort of that, there's your balance between, being spontaneous versus sort of planning things out a lot, which, I mentioned with this podcast, right? I was like writing some things down, and I'm thinking like, okay, how should I talk about this? Should I talk about this part first? Should I do this? And the more that I think about it, the more I get stuck, and I don't really know where to begin. And right. And so what I did, especially with a lot of these podcasts, is I'm an overthinker like that. I want to give you guys good material. I want to provide you with something helpful. And in my want to do that, I overthink, and I somewhat just paralyze myself with the possibilities of all the different things and orders that I can go over, and the way that, hey, maybe I'll miss something or say something wrong. that I didn't mean to, but still, that's just paralyzing me from doing anything. What's better is that, like, I used my intellect, I made some notes, I had a rough idea of what I'd like to speak about, and I try not to overthink it more than that. Other than that, I just, plug in this mic and hit record, and we hope that some beautiful spontaneous magic seems to just come on out of my mouth here. So that's sort of the nature of this lesson here, and it was the nature of how I approach a lot of these podcasts and my life. It's just sort of an unpredictability and, like a confidence in yourself that it's okay to make mistakes. Like, you don't have to be perfect. It's more just about you wanting to just, do well and find the truth. And the truth is somewhat ever changing, as your perception changes. So you don't pretend to know the truth, but you pretend to understand the truth is important, and you find the truth through, like spontaneous intuition balanced with your intellect. All right, so I think that is enough on today's topics. If I can suggest that you maybe try this out sometime in your life, today, whenever, right? If you're thinking to yourself, like, oh, these are my plans for the week, maybe something spontaneous comes up in your life. Maybe that's the Creator offering you an opportunity to experience some magic. Try to jump on that opportunity. Be spontaneous. When you're spontaneous, I would suggest that's where you find the magic. That's where you find the synchronicity. That's where you find those random, beautiful connections with people that you wouldn't ever have experienced if you just sat at home on the couch, thinking this is safe and my intellect is just choosing to calm down and watch TV this evening, right? Something like this, do something spontaneous. Get on out there. Or, even spontaneity comes in many forms. It could just be reaching out to somebody random, just doing something within your intuition. Let your intuition somewhat guide you. Use your intellect to somewhat refine how you would like to make the choice, but don't have so much attachment to the outcome that you're going to be disappointed one way or the other. What matters is your intention to serve. If you have good intentions to serve, things may happen positively and negatively. That's okay. It's not about necessarily being right all the time. It's just about trying to, be a good force for love, and just understanding that, if you do make a seeming failure, that you are going to just move forward and try to avoid that mistake in the future. So you can be spontaneous. You don't have to be perfect. You can make mistakes. Study your spontaneous reactions to things. This will lead you to understanding within yourself, which is going to lead to balance, which is going to lead to future you being a more spontaneously positive thing, instead of sometimes maybe you spontaneously react negatively. Well, as you spontaneously react negatively and you work with those in the long run in meditation and contemplation, eventually your spontaneous reactions will somewhat just be naturally positive. It's not something that you need to necessarily try at. It just will happen as you seek the truth, as you seek love, as you seek unity. Okay, so thank you guys for listening. If this podcast made sense to you, you can find links to the material at theoneinfinitecreator.com, and I have links to the LL Research material, who is the people who provide us all of this information for free. If you appreciate my podcasts, maybe even my daily posts on Instagram, I really appreciate it if you would join my Patreon. That is on theoneinfinitecreator.com. Just scroll down, you'll find links there. You can send me a one-time PayPal. You can even pick up something in my shop. You get something back, and then I get a little bit of that too. All supports me in doing this podcast and giving me a little bit more time to give you guys, hopefully, more in-depth dives into the Law of One material. I really like doing this. I appreciate that I have some supporters who have my back and want to listen to this stuff and support my endeavors in service. And so thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Give me a like, share, subscribe, and I will be back again next week with some sweet topics, hopefully. So yeah, take care, guys. Love you.